Chapter 7. The Squirrel Girl Sensei. Her feline ears perked up at the sound of commotion. She couldn't immediately place the sound, but it was enough to spark her curiosity. She placed a fistful of herbs and roots into her waist pack, and then decided to take a break from the boring tasks of flora hunting.
A little bit of adventure,
She said to herself with a smile as her tail curled slightly. Soon, the Nekomata was dashing through the forest, and a few moments later, she was faced with a sight she'd never seen.
What is it? It smells strange.
She sniffed the creature lying before her. She could tell it was still alive, unconscious by the sound of its rhythmic breathing.
I wonder what Sensei would say about me bringing home some strange humanoid.
The cat girl put her hand up to her chin in thought for a few moments as she cocked her head to and fro. Ultimately, she decided,
Why not?
She scooped up the curious humanoid creature and hoisted it over her shoulder effortlessly. Its tattered clothes reeked of fresh grass and blood. Soon, the young cat girl was off. Her quick, agile movements were a thing of wonder, even while carrying an unconscious passenger. As he opened his eyes, Ryuga could feel his body revolting against him. It had been a while since he felt so sore, so drained. His body felt heavy, as if he'd used all of his energy to the brink. It took him a few moments to open his eyes, but the first thing he noticed was a thatched roof, seemingly made of straw no less. It took a moment for him to realize that he was in a foreign environment. He pulled himself up with a great deal of effort, nearly rolling off the makeshift straw mattress where he lay. It would be a few moments more before he could manage to stand on his own 2 feet. Why does my body feel so heavy? He whispered to himself. It was time for some self-assessment. Ryuga took note of the state of his body. His clothes were ripped, shredded in some places. His school uniform was in tatters, smeared with dirt and caked with blood. No doubt the blood of Benji or his other classmates. His limbs seemed okay, nothing injured or broken, and though his body felt sluggish, his mind was clear. After a few deep breaths, he took in the environment. A hut, by all appearances, with 2 straw cots in separate corners. The place was tidy, and it seemed well lived in, though there were no signs of anyone but himself. Where the heck am I? Ryuga said aloud. It took some time to move towards the door of the hut, which seemed to be made of a bamboo-like wood. Very rustic, he thought to himself as he stepped outside. Nearby the straw hut, there was a fire going, a metal pot set up to boil just over the dancing flames. Whatever was in the pot smelled fragrant enough to cause his stomach to rumble, a signal that Ryuga may have been out longer than he thought. As he looked around, he realized he was in a forest, though it didn't resemble any place he'd ever been, or seen for that matter. The sounds of life began to come into focus as he stared out into the distance, slim trees towering all around. By the look of things, the time of day was afternoon. After wandering a few steps from the hut, Ryuga began to shout. Hello? Akira? He screamed. Considering his last recollection, he was hoping that Akira would be nearby, but to no avail. After several minutes of screaming and listening for a response, he decided to move deeper into the forest in search of his classmate. After traveling several meters from the hut, Ryuga's attention was drawn towards the sound of thuds and shouts. His first thought was that Akira was being attacked by yet another creature, so he summoned what little strength he had to break into a dash. Akira! Akira, can you hear me? Akira! He shouted repeatedly as he pushed through the forest, branches and brushes slapping against him as he moved. Soon he found himself approaching the nearby commotion, his mind racing with the worst of misgivings as he burst into the clearing. Akira! Akira! For a moment, Ryuga didn't realize what was happening. Before him, he saw 2 humanoid figures locked in battle. One resembled a very short, or perhaps rather large, squirrel. The other looked like a cat girl, complete with neko ears, claws, and a tail. The 2 seemed much too focused on their battle to take note of Ryuga, who simply stood there, mouth agape. Their movements seemed supersonic to Ryuga, who could do little else but take in as much as he could from the battle. It seemed as if the cat girl had an upper hand. She was much more aggressive with her strikes. Looks were deceiving, though. It took just one connecting strike from the squirrel-like humanoid in order to down the feline. Hello? Ryuga said, finally grabbing the attention of the two humanoid creatures before him. The cat girl immediately got to her feet, dusting off her clothes in one quick motion. Likewise, the squirrel eyed Ryuga curiously, then pointed to the cat girl as it spoke. While Ryuga could tell the two were conversing, he couldn't understand a word being said. It was a completely different language than anything he'd ever heard, and definitely not human. "Can you understand me?" Ryuga said, taking a slow step backwards. The cat girl smiled as she bounced towards him, breaking out into a leaping pounce. In response, Ryuga could do little else but try to run, but to no avail. She easily pinned him down to the ground and used her full weight to restrict his movements. As Ryuga struggled to free himself, the squirrel-like humanoid walked towards him, one hand behind its back and the other outstretched. For a moment, Ryuga felt a tingling sensation. It was as if the hairs on the back of his neck all began to stand on end. Then, no sooner had the sensation passed, a small orb of white energy appeared near the fingertip of the approaching creature. Suffering from flashbacks of his encounter with the dragon creature, Ryuga struggled even more violently.
Nyah!
The cat girl said as she forced him down even harder, making it so that he couldn't move, let alone breathe. Ryuga was forced to watch as the small white orb floated towards his face, eventually melting into his forehead. The sensation was like a cool chill, which washed over his mind, sending tingles to every corner of his brain.
What about now?
Ryuga opened his eyes to a strange voice.
You should be able to understand now.
The feminine voice said.
Hey, you're holding him too tight. Get off, Parisia.
The squirrel-like humanoid said as she waved her hands in a shoe motion.
But it was fun. Sorry, I got carried away, Sensei.
The cat girl said as she hopped backwards, landing on all fours as she watched Ryuga intently.
You can speak, right? I've never seen a creature quite like you. You can understand what I'm saying, right?
The squirrel lady said impatiently as she watched Ryuga sit up. Yes, he finally said, rubbing his chest.
Good. I was worried I'd lost my touch, or that you're a dullard.
The squirrel lady laughed as she spoke. She seemed very pleased with her stupid joke. I have so many questions. I have no idea where to begin, really. Ryuga said as he sat down before the two creatures. They didn't seem all that dangerous. Though he quickly realized escape would be impossible, it might be better to use words at this point.
You may ask,
the squirrel lady said, placing both of her hands behind her back as she spoke. She could be no taller than 3 feet even, but her puffy, billowing tail reached slightly higher behind her back. By contrast, the cat girl was around the same height as Akira. Where am I? Ryuga began.
Nope, there's something you've forgotten first. Have you no manners, smelly creature?
The squirrel replied, dismissing his question. Ryuga squinted his eyes, confused by her response.
Introduce yourself, Stinky,
the cat girl said as she watched Ryuga intently. I'm sorry. I did forget my manners. My name is Ryuga. May I have your names?
Imelda. This is my student, Parisia.
The squirrel lady known as Imelda responded. Hello. Can I assume you two were the ones who brought me to this place? Ryuga then asked.
This one did. You should thank her. She found you in the nearby forest a few days ago.
Days? I've been out that long?
Seems so. Mind telling us what you were doing in the middle of a dangerous place like this? Passed out all by your lonesome?
Imelda then asked. I wasn't alone. I was with someone. A girl by the name of Akira. She's shorter than Parisia here. Dark hair and unique eyes. Have you by chance seen her anywhere? Imelda glanced over at Parisia, who seemed to be lost in thought before replying.
Nope. And there you have it.
Imelda replied. Damn it. I have to find her. If this area is dangerous and she's all alone, I definitely have to find her, Ryuga said as he began to get to his feet.
Well, I can understand the desire for you to look for your friend, but I don't think it's possible for you,
Imelda said as she began to size up Ryuga. She stepped forward and peered at him very closely. Ryuga noticed the retina of her eyes. Each was slightly different.
Yep, you definitely die. You're weak. Super weak,
Imelda said a few moments later, turning her back to Ryuga. That may be true, but no matter what, I absolutely must go. Could you please take me to the place you found me?
If this girl, Akira, was anywhere near the area where we found you, I believe Parisia would have found her as well. She has pretty uncanny senses as a Nikomata.
Imelda said casually.
But if you insist.
Imelda continued, turning to face Ryuga once more.
There are a few things we need to do first. We'll head back to my home. Follow me, Ryuga.
Parisia and Imelda began to walk back the way Ryuga had come. Reluctantly, he followed, his mind racing as to the fate of Akira.
Confectionery treats for such a young huntress.